Hey there everybody, this is Z-Wink from Z-Wink University, and I wanted to go over a quick video showing you how I enumerate, well rather check API endpoints really quickly from API spec documents. I've been asked this a few times. I'm coming off a batch of P1s with Pinterest and a lot of P2s right now, and I've been going through their APIs very meticulously, testing for broken access control issues because they use integer-based IDs for everything. So they also have thousands of APIs, so it's taking a little bit of time, but I want to show you one mechanism that I use that's really handy. So let's say that you find an OpenAPI spec, okay? So what's happened here is you've requested, a Swagger endpoint or an API docs endpoint or something, and the response you get back from it looks like this. It's an OpenAPI spec, and this is just the raw, formatting right here, just a whole absolute ton of API documentation. What I do is I take the response out of Burp Suite and I copy and paste it into a file and call it .json, okay, a .json file. And then you can load that local file. Say I'm just on the local file system here for the Pinterest target. You can load that local JSON file into Firefox, and Firefox does a beautiful job at parsing the JSON into a particular format that makes it able to be copied and pasted. I don't know if that's intended or not, but it's at least something that I've started doing. So if you open up the paths, you now can see that there's all these different API paths that are somewhat interesting. So what I do is I copy all of these paths right here, like that, and while I'm still holding it down, I hit Control-C, and now it's on my clipboard, so I can come over here to like a new notepad window and paste it in here, and you can see we've got these annoying kind of little dots because it copied that off. You can just come over and actually just tell it to replace all of those, like do a find and replace. So all the URLs are clean now. So at this point, it's just a matter of selecting the different variables that it's expecting, like advertiser ID, and giving it a valid advertiser ID for testing, like that. When you go through and you do that for each one of the different parameters that you see in the squiggly brackets, like that's a user ID right there, right? And then there's a bill ID right here, right? So you would go through and you would give them numbers for those valid objects, and then you have officially populated, most of these URLs. Here we have business IDs, and I'm not doing them all, but like before I tested these 108 and 100, I've already tested all these, but before I tested these 196 URLs, I went through and actually replaced them with valid objects that I had found while going over the product, right? So then what you would do is you copy and paste all of these URLs like this, and you would go over to Burp Suite, and here we're in the intruder, right, on the intruder tab for api.pinterest.com, which is where that API lives. And you just highlight the URL here, hit add squiggly things, and come on over to the payloads. And we're going to paste in our payload list, okay? So these are all of our payloads that we're going to pretend we cleaned up nicely. And then you would uncheck the URL encode characters button down here so that they actually are treated as slashes. And then you would just hit start attack. And it would go and it would do its stuff and things, okay? Now this was actually the ads, this is the ads v3 or ads v4 endpoint. So I would actually have needed to add the ads/v4, for it to be valid. Yeah, there we go. So I don't have an authentication token in these payloads, so nothing at all is going to work because I don't want y'all to see my authentication token, go figure. But that's how I do the testing, right? So what happens here is you'll get some amount of 200 codes that would normally come back. And if you're getting 200 codes, when you've changed to somebody else's ID value, that usually represents an IDOR immediately, okay? So if you see a URL with somebody else's ID in it using your authentication token, and it's returning a 200 response code, it's probably an insecure direct object reference or ID substitution issue, whatever you want to call it. And when you get 400s back, a lot of times it's telling you that you need to add parameters manually. Like see on this one, it says entity type is required. So you would need to take this one, and for like say send a repeater, and you would need to add the entity type parameter on manually and give it an ID and start testing it. So automation's not going to handle 100% of these. And when you get down to response codes like 405, so that's saying a GET request isn't supported, maybe you have to try a put or a post or something on those. And to do that, you need to have an advertiser ID that belongs to you so you can safely test the operation, because otherwise you might be screwing up somebody else's account. So you always need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've probably got 10 Pinterest accounts now that I've tested different things on, and I keep them very concise and organized in my notepad, which I keep up all the time. Loving the third monitor I added, it's super helpful there. But this is sort of how I do the initial batch testing, right? And the quick and easiest IDORs are the ones that are, you know, taking an ID somewhere and responding with a 200 status code, and you look at it and you're like, I got 2 of the P1s that way, okay? Actually, so that was really easy. The third one was a put or post based request that involved a good bit of actual payload crafting in order to get the response to be accepted and bring back and do the stuff and things. But so far it looks like I'm sitting about 3, maybe 4 P1s with Pinterest in 2 weeks. So I'm quite happy with that. And you know, lots of P2s, and it's all just from this broken access control testing stuff. I know some of y'all are going to ask me, how did I find this in the first place? I'm not going to tell you that, unfortunately, but all I can say is fuzzers are your friend. But the last video I made, I think, on Pinterest and enumerating stuff, I had showed that the GraphQL endpoint was open, and somebody went and reported those as P4s, and now all the GraphQL endpoints are closed. So I'm glad I had saved that data off, but all I can say is I'm making a video of it. I'm serving myself before y'all. I hate to tell you that. So hopefully this is helpful, and again, just use copy and paste. Use your notepad to you know, to clean up your data and do batch testing like this. A lot of people talk about loving the authorize add-on, or you know, this thing over here. Yeah. So, you know, authorize, you can sort of enable it and it'll automatically change bits of your payload and re-request them and stuff for you. But the problem is it's got a bunch of noise, and it's nowhere near as organized as just using the intruder like I'm showing you right here, because you are concisely testing for broken access control issues here. And then you can replay it again with the auth header dropped and see if some of them are a straight auth bypass or they're a true IDOR, right? Because if you're passing somebody else's ID, and you know, you're getting data back. Well, first of all, is that because they're not checking the object, or is it because they're not checking authentication at all? So you know, you have to determine that, and that can change the difference between maybe a P1 and a P2 or something, depending on the target. But hopefully this was helpful. Very quick video. Just wanted to show you kind of how you can slay batch endpoints. Let me know if you have any questions. Peace out.